This is Filippo Fontanelli. I'm very happy to welcome all of you. I'm sure you are scattered across very many time zones, so I don't dare trying to say whether it's a good morning or good afternoon, but wherever you are, whenever you are, you're very welcome today. We are here hosted by the National University of Singapore, and the occasion is the presentation, launch and discussion upon a book that came out early this year. Here it is, I hope you can see it. It's called China's Foreign Investment Legal Regime. And we have with us the author, Dr. Yawen Zheng. My name is Filippo Fontanelli and I teach international economic law at the University of Edinburgh. Yawen is a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for International Law at the National University of Singapore. And this event is divided into two halves. In the first half, there will be me, University of Edinburgh, International Economic Law. Yawen will present the book. And then we are happy to have Professor Eng Wang from the Management Singapore University and adjunct professor at the University of New South Wales, who will start the discussion. We will also be happy to have a wider discussion with everybody who is in the audience today. For that reason, after we have Professor Wang's comments, we will be taking questions. You can use the box, question and answers at the bottom of the screen, or you can raise your hand and I can give you the floor for a quick question. I need to make an announcement. It's a very nice one. We are happy to share with anybody who is interested a discount code for buying this book at a discount. I think it will appear in the chat, so keep an eye on it. It's really much worth it. Now, a few words of introduction before we give the floor to Yawen. First of all, I was lucky and privileged to see this book growing out of a doctoral dissertation a few years ago, before Yawen took off and left Europe. She was a doctoral candidate at the University of Edinburgh, so I know the origin of this book very well. And I want to tell you a little story because I think it will make you appreciate better the importance of this book and the work it seeks to do. So first of all, I remember that for a while we were discussing about the angle of the study, whether we would, well, Yawen really would limit herself to survey the existing legislation, domestic and international, or also add an angle of critical analysis on whether Chinese legislation, international and domestic, could effectively, genuinely align with or promote the Chinese development goals. And I'm glad that she chose to pursue that, that angle and that perspective, because I think we can all agree today development goals, sustainable development goals, industrial development goals, geopolitical development goals are all the rage. We now know that the regulation of international trade and investment flows is no longer only about opening marketing opportunities and liberalizing flows, but it's about managed trade. I am sure that in the discussion later with Yawen, and in the discussion with Professor Wang, and in the discussion in the second half of today's event, there's going to be a lot of talk about the direction of trade and investment in the current geopolitical scenario. But it's important to recognize that we have in this book a very solid analysis and description of how China is trying, or has been trying, or maybe has failed to achieve to some extent the pursuit of specific development goals. And if you look at what they are, I'm sure you will agree with me that this is extremely current. So the development goals that Yaven is analyzing and against which she is assessing the performance and the record of Chinese law include building technological capacity, deepening global economical integration, promoting green development, protection on security, and participation in economic global governance and rulemaking. Now, that might sound very obvious and very current and very topical now, but it was a great idea at the time when this project started a few years back to have that as a target of assessment of international and domestic law on both flows of investment, outbound and inbound. Export restrictions, import restrictions are now the talk in town. And it's important that we have a work like this to assess where China is coming from and where China, I suppose, is headed. So there will be a short presentation by Yaven for the benefit of all of you, those who have read the book, those who haven't had the chance yet to read the book. And then I will call the colleague, Professor Eng Wang, to make a short presentation on the aspects of the book that caught his attention and he would like to share with us. So if that's okay, and if Yaven is ready, I believe there's a presentation coming up. I'll shut myself up for a few minutes and I'll give the author and the guest of honor of today the chance to present her research. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Filippo, for coming here and giving the introduction of the project and the book. And also, I would like to thank my boss, Yang and CIL, especially the event team, for helping me to organize this event. And thank you so much for everyone who comes to my book launch and shows your interest in the book. So my point here, so my presentation is to share some key points of the book, and hopefully we can have more discussion later after my presentation. First, let me share my screen. Okay, so I think Filippo has already shed some light on why we did this, why we do this project. So normally they want more foreign
Yaven, do
investors.
you want to swap it to the other viewing so we see the biggest slide?
Sure. Is it good now?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. So states want foreign investments because they believe that foreign investments can promote their development. However, development is a very important and is difficult to articulate or define because maybe different people have different understandings of development. So it can hardly be used as a assessment standard of law. That's why I narrow it down to development goals, which can be relatively better identified. And I refer to these two important documents to find China's development goals. First is China's 5-year plans for economy and social development. For those who are not very familiar with China, 5-year development plan is a very important document in China. It basically set out a series of social and economic development initiatives issued by the Chinese Communist Party. And it's like a framework document under which more detailed initiatives and plans can be formulated in different sectors. So the latest one, the one I use in my book, is the 14th 5-year plan for economy and social development and the long-range objectives through the year 2035. So I think it's now we call the 14th 5-year period in China. That's what we are undergoing now. We are building this according to this. We are building China according to these documents. So all the development goals in these documents, I think is very important for the assessment of the legal regime. And the second document I refer to is the reports jointly produced by the World Bank and the State Council of China. It is called the China 2030, Building a Modern, Harmonious and Creative Society, Why it is important? Because it basically set out the goals China needs to achieve or have to achieve before 2030, and also what China should do and what difficulties China face to achieve these goals. And it has a very large part relevance to China's inward and outward investments. So from these two documents, I found 5 major development goals, which are really mentioned by Filippo. So the first is building technological capacity, which is made based on the belief that inward and outward foreign investments can bring technology spillovers and increase factor productivity manifold. But in that case, we need higher level investments, which can help us to build technological capacity instead of like all kind of investments. And the second goal is deepening integration into the global economy. So it basically means greater access to foreign markets, participation in the worldwide segmentation of the production process, and the establishment of brand names with global recognition. So this also needs the support from larger foreign investment flows. The third goal is promotion of green development. It includes 3 sub-goals, which are high energy efficiency, natural resources governance, and environmental sustainability. So these goals, first, it requires more green foreign investments, and second, it also requires effective regulation from the country. And the next goal is protection of security. This goal is actually common across different countries, but the specialty regarding China is that we have a broader understanding of national security compared to a traditional notion of the term. So in China, we think that national security can extend to other aspects like cultural security and the dominance of ideology, which means the protection of national brands and traditional culture are also relevant to this development goal. So like previous goal, so first this goal would need more foreign investments because these foreign investments can help to build the economic link between China and other countries. This will definitely, for sure, you can help to increase this, the protection of security in China. And second, it also requires more effective supervision of these foreign investments from the country. And the last development goal is participation in global economic governance and rulemaking. So China has long been a rule taker of global economic rule, and now it wants to be a rule maker. It wants to use its status as both a large host state and home state of foreign investments, as well as largest developing state in the world. So based on this, like the participation, wide participation in global investment markets, China want to have more influence on this rulemaking. So definitely it needs more support from the foreign investment flows. And also it requires a high governance level inside of China. So these development goals are basically the standard I use to assess the foreign investment legal regime to see whether they can achieve these goals. Then what are the requirements? To put very simple terms, basically we just need more desired foreign investment flows. But how specifically? I basically divide them into the requirement into 2 parts in the book. So one is the promotion of foreign investments, and the second is the supervision of these investments. This can ensure that the investments encouraged by China is the ones that they want, the country wants. So these are the basic components of China's foreign investment legal regime. It includes China's domicile laws governing inward foreign investments and outward investments, as well as China's investment treaties and the Belt and Road Initiative. So these laws, I use each of them occupies like 1 chapter in the book. So I chart the development of this foreign investment legal regime from 1970s. That's when China began to open up its market to foreign investments and begin to promote its investments abroad. And that's also the time when China began to gradually build the foreign investment legal regime. So from tracking the development, I can see like how the regime changes in the past decades. So basically, it's very clear that the legal regime has made a lot of like substantial positive steps towards the development goals. Especially, it can be seen that these key points has been improved a lot. So the administrative procedures are simplified. So the time frames are shorter, it's more simple. So it's not that complex. You don't need to submit that many documents like before. And also the administrative authority handling the procedures, they are now have lower level authorities handling, so you don't need to go through all the levels of authorities. So which means now the burdensome of undergoing these administrative procedures are significantly relieved. However, it doesn't mean that the supervision regime is worse, because it actually enhances the efficiency of supervision regime, because the coverage is broader, is more comprehensive, and now they have more tools. They use more tools to supervise foreign investments, including both pre-entry and after post-entry stage, and also maybe they can use various approaches to check the foreign investments, instead of before they relying completely on approval procedures. So now it's actually more effective, but also it allows more autonomy for foreign investments to make their investment decisions. Also, now the investment environments are better because of a more certain foreign investment legal regime, and also more active support from the authorities, including government service, like provision of information, and also other relatively support like incentives or investment insurance. So I will quickly go through major improvements in the regime. So regarding inward foreign investments, now it's just for investors only need to register their investments. It's a very quick procedure, and they don't need to wait for any response from the authority. And also now an active list with more clear sectors opening to investments are used. So it's very clear for foreign investments which sector they can go in, and what kind of requirements for those investments in active list. And also, because of the cancellation of special laws pertaining to foreign investments, now the playing field between foreign investment and domestic investments are leveled. And also, many concerns of investors are addressed in the law, like expropriation of investment and also the protection of intellectual property rights. So these are the rules that add to the latest law in China's domestic foreign investment law regime. And then now China also has a new national security review regime, which clearly put out the rules. So how to undergo this procedure, what authorities are responsible for this procedure, and what are the consequences. So now the protection of security has also been improved. And then likewise, a supervision regime is also relatively new, because previously China only relies on pre-establishment approval procedure. But now, after the establishment of foreign investments, there are various tools available for the authorities to check whether these foreign investments still comply with the law. And then, because of clear rules and also stronger relief channels available for foreign investments, the new law has a stronger guarantee of implementation, which ensure that this law can really achieve its goal, which is to promote China's development goals. Similar things also happen to China's domestic laws governing our foreign investments. The same is like for investors, they only need to go through a streamlined procedure before they establish and invest in other countries. Also, the effectiveness of supervision is enhanced because China now has more tools to grasp more information regarding our investments, and then so that the coverage of the supervision is broader now, and they have very clear goals, what to supervise, and the goal of supervision, and the tools, like what kind of tools should be used every time. And also because the rules are clear, which also means better transparency. So both investors and authorities knows what to expect from the regime. Which also means the ex-post supervision is strengthened. Also, we can see larger role is played by the authority. So previously, the authority relies on many other institutions like the embassies, Chinese embassies abroad, to supervise these foreign investments. But now in China, the authorities, they have more responsibilities, more roles, more powers in this regard. So regarding the protection of our foreign investments, the service provided by the authorities, including providing more information to investors, and also these authorities, they are now playing a larger role in protecting foreign investments, like they can intervene in the dispute settlement process, and also they can provide more advice to investors who suffer from like discriminatory treatments in other countries. And also investment insurance is available for foreign investors who invest abroad. So this can help to protect the interests of China's outward investments. And regarding the promotion regime, there are various regimes available, like special funds, credit support, tax deduction, and exemptions. Though this can relieve the burden of investing abroad, so investors can use this support to make more investments. And also this support can help them to be very competitive in our other investment markets. However, despite that, all the improvements sound so attractive, but still problems are very obvious. So the administrative procedures, they are still prolonged and burdensome. So now still investors, they may still need to undergo some other different procedures, especially because different authorities, they may supervise the same investments. So you may need to go, investors may need to undergo like different administrative procedures taking by different authorities, which can be very trouble. And then the investors also complain that investment protections are not sufficient, and they are not receiving enough government service and support. For instance, maybe the investment insurance, the coverage is not broad enough to cover all the risks investment face in other countries. And also for the intervention in dispute settlement process, it's not transparent enough to see what kind of investors, what kind of investments they have already benefited from this regime, and what the government has done to support these foreign investments. And also supervision of the investments may be not enough, because it seems that the government still lost track of the large amount of investments abroad. And also because the legal regime is very complicated. So they got so many different legal documents in the regime. And that's why omissions, overlap, and conflicts is almost impossible to avoid in the legal regime. And it can cause trouble for both investors and the authorities. So specifically regarding domestic laws governing inward foreign investments, we can still spot regulatory flaws, like those rules regarding supervision regime is not clear. And also like national security review and anti-monopoly review, there are many rules regarding specifically procedure are not stipulated in law. So maybe it can subject to the discretion of authorities. And also the same thing happen in negative lists. So basically we can see that the law is still vague to some extent. It's not clear, so maybe investors will still have trouble to navigate all the clear rules in the regime to see how to undergo all these administrative procedures. And also it can influence the effectiveness of the regime, like the supervision over foreign investments. Despite the law itself, other issues can also influence the implementation of the legal regime, like investments. They are supervised by multiple regulatory agencies, both from different levels, like central level and local level of authorities, as well as maybe different authorities in the same level, like from central level is Ministry of Commerce, and also the National Commission on Reform and Development. So it can be complicated sometimes, because maybe investors will need to submit similar documents to different authorities and subject to the supervision, like similar supervision by different authorities. And also the regulatory and institutional environment in China is not stable. So China is a country that can be heavily influenced by its policies, like the very recent famous zero COVID case policies. It has lots of influence on foreign investments, and that's not something that the foreign investment legal regime can deal with. Also, the remedies available to investors are not reliable enough, so it can still be difficult to see relief from these remedies, especially like if you go to administrative suits or reconciliation procedures. It can still difficult for investors to win against governments. Also, I would say that maybe the steps towards development goals is not be enough, is not ambitious enough. So it still have lots of indeterminacy here in the regime. And also the improvements have only limited coverage, which means there are still many laws. They are not covered by these positive changes of the legal regime. So foreign investors still need to deal with those kind of problems. Similar things also happen to China's domestic laws governing our foreign investments. And I would say that it's even worse because the array of legal documents is more complicated here. And there's no law. So there's no law passed by the People's Congress. They are all administrative documents passed by different level of government authorities. So that's why it's even more chaos here in the legal regime. And also investment promotion and protection regime is not good enough. So maybe it will be difficult for investors to get this support from the government. And also maybe investors, like especially for private investors, maybe it will be even more difficult for them. So these two charts, I just want to show that it can be a proof that to show how China lose track on its foreign investments. So the first chart is the data produced by the Ministry of Commerce. It basically shows the data Chinese government know. So you can see that it's very different from the data from CGIT. So CGIT data is collected from Chinese investors. And it basically shows that many foreign investments, maybe they hide away from the supervision regime of China. That's why you can see the large difference of the amount here. And also, like some countries, maybe China has no idea how many investments in their country, like Brazil. So this can be a proof, and it's also used in the book. And this chart, I also want to show the problem of domestic supervision regime of foreign investment. So this is the random check happened after China's investors established their investments in China. And you can see that different places actually, they conduct this random check in a very different frequency. So some cities, maybe they are more keen to conduct more random checks on foreign investments. And some others, maybe they are not very keen to, so they have like relatively less results. So when compare this data, I found that like the implementation really varies across different regions in China. So it may show that the supervision is not that effective as that shown in law. Turning to China's international investment agreements, China has altogether 134 IIAs that are in force or signed but yet to enter into force. So this is also a very important part of China's foreign investment legal regime. I only include those treaty contents that either directly incorporate development goals or can be designed to suit the need of the goals in the book. So for treaty contents directly incorporating development goals, they are preamble, investment promotion clause, non-lowering of standard clause, general exception clause, and criteria to determine indirect expropriation. So by incorporating, I mean these development goals can be directly stipulated in this clause to show what kind of foreign investments China wants or China wants to protect. And then for treaty contents designed to suit the needs of the goals, I include definition of investments, standards of investment treatments, and the obligations of food protection and security. So this clause, they can decide to see, like maybe they can, like for instance, they can be carved out, like to carve out the investments that China doesn't want. So the protection of investment treaties won't extend to these investments. So obviously there are different needs between inward and outward investments. So for our investments, I think these investors, they would need like highest level of protection from investment treaties, and also limited room for the host states to exercise their governance power. But for inward investments, they would prefer more balanced investment treaties, so China can govern these investments more effectively, while these investments can also enjoy certain extent of protection. However, China did not adopt this approach. Rather, it used a unified approach, which means not much difference are made between investment agreements between main destination and source states. It also means that both kinds of investment treaties are different to suit the need of China's investments. For instance, like for our investments, when they suffer from some government measures from host states, they may find that it's difficult to seek compensation from this country because investment agreements only provide limited access to investment arbitration. And for inward investments, maybe China will find that only limited room are provided to them to supervise these investments. However, this approach may still has advantage. So because of this unified approach, it gives China more solid reason or base to participate in global rulemaking. So that which means like China can use this investment treaty negotiation experience to introduce its own investment treaty models, or which can be more persuasive if it's used consistently. So the problem here is that we have China has lots of outdated treaties, like those treaties signed in 1980s and 1990s. So these treaties, they cannot really seal the need nowadays, not only for China but also for investments, also like for other countries. So these treaties, because they still valid and still can be applied now, it can create trouble for newly reformed investment treaties. Now turning to the last part is the Belt and Road Initiative. So I mainly focus on the 5 cooperation priorities that that's proposed by the Belt and Road, which are people-to-people bond policy coordination, facilities connectivity, unimpeded trade, and financial integration. So I think from the outset, right, from the meaning of these 5 cooperation priorities, we can see that to achieve this, we need the support of more foreign investments, especially like facilities connectivity. Definitely China needs more foreign investments to build this infrastructure to achieve this. Like also like people-to-people bonds, lots of activities here needs the support of investments. Also, after achieve these priorities, it can also support the flow of more foreign investments, like better infrastructure, better cooperation between different countries can definitely promote larger investment flows between these countries. So generally, the conclusion is that the Belt and Road Initiative can promote investments that can directly contribute to the development goals. And also it can promote other actions that can benefit the achievement of the development goals. However, it do face various challenges because this the Belt and Road Initiative mainly like involve the countries with relatively weak regulatory environment and relatively bad investment environment. So it can create trouble for these foreign investments. And also the whole initiative overly rely on China's funding, China's support, and also China's outward investments, which means if China lost the ability to support this large amount of investment abroad, then the whole initiative can run into trouble. So that's why I think the whole initiative, the problem is that it faces uncertain long-term perspective. So it's difficult to know now that how sustainable can the initiative be. So what I want to say here is that the key takeaway from the presentation is China's foreign investment legal regime has definitely improved a lot towards the development goals. We can see lots of improvements has been made in the past decades. And I think this is actually a very good lesson to learn if you want to further improve the legal regime. And also if other countries also want to achieve these similar development goals. However, from what we can see now is that maybe a better legal regime does not necessarily mean a better investment environment for foreign investments. That's why maybe this can explain why both China's inward foreign investments and outward investments has been declined recently. And the implementation of foreign investment legal regime is not really, it can not only guaranteed by the law, but you also need a better politics and international environment, because especially for China, the implementation of law is really easily influenced by politics and international relations, which means that despite a very good design in the law, the implementation is relatively uncertain. Also, I think because of the tracking of historical development in the research, it can be very helpful to learn how the regime will be developed in the future. So I think I have little doubt that the regime will continue to be improved toward the development goals. The uncertainty remains in the border environment, like whether other issues can be solved properly, like corruption, like the heavily policy influenced environment, so on and so forth. So this will be very interesting in the future to see. That's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yawen. That was a real tour de force to present all the critical content of your book. Now, I really don't want to waste any more time, so I would rather call to the floor Professor Han Wang from the School of Law of Singapore Management University and adjunct at the University of New South Wales, who will share with us for a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, his some critical remarks on the content of this book. Thank you very much, Heng.
Thank you very much, Filippo, for the kind introduction, and also thank you for the invitation. And at the very beginning, I would like to extend my warm congratulations to Yawen for fantastic and very timely work on China and international investment law. I'm sure that I want to join Filippo by encourage you guys to look into this excellent book. Because it's cover a quite wide range of area of investments, not only about domestic law, but also about international or bilateral, arrangements, but also going beyond that to Belt and Road Initiative. It also covers not only what are happening, and also more importantly, lay a solid foundation for we look into the future. So that's also something I would like to discuss briefly, to see what has caught my attention. So I think that since Yawen has done a fantastic job, in explaining and critical reviewing what is happening in China, and also guiding us through what is happening in the future, what the direction or what are the issues we look into. I think it makes sense for me to also look in that direction, to see whether we have something that, what is the future of China international investment? Because in Yawen's book, her research question, one of the major ones is considering whether China's foreign investment legal regime has worked as expected, reaping the benefits and also addressing the concern raised by foreign investments. And she also has used a criteria, a number of criteria to access that, including, security, to sustainable development, to the governance in the international stage. So if we take those kind of into account, I think that if we want to look into the future of China and international investment as the direction or the landscape critical view by Yawen, I think they may have some sub-questions we can look into. Firstly, how do we understand China and the international investment law? And secondly, what are the broad implications of China and international investment for the public-private sectors, like investment decisions and rule negotiations? I think Yawen also, in his book, also discuss about, what, for example, BRI treaty or like treaty, we'll see whether there'll be, how far it can go. And she has also spent a lot of ink in that regard to see, what are those developments maybe. So it'd be important to look into what are the broader implications. And thirdly, to look into what are the future directions. So I will go one by one very quickly, given the time. Firstly, how to understand China's foreign investment. I think that's a way which we can look into that and also reflect in the book is that hardware and software. So obviously, investment involves a lot of hardware, which makes that different from, trade, new infrastructure, which are critical for digital economy or for the, like you think about railway, you think about the dam and so on and so forth. Which may shape the the distribution of benefits in a country, but also may broadly in even in the region, because they link with different countries and they have long-term implications, because they will be there for quite a long time. And secondly, you also can think that is a software, which are the rules and institution developments. That's also linked with one of the criteria, Yawen using in her book, that is about how do you assess China's role in economic governance, in shaping or affecting the rules in that regard. I think these are very important ones for us to look into that, how you develop hardware, and also that involvement in software issue, like, what are the standards, for example, you use for your railway, or how that be affected by investment, not only investment treaties, but also by investment agreements, which will be also important, or the practice. And secondly, I think that if we understand China's and foreign investment, it's about how to understand the network. I think that's an emerging network of investment. Think about, Yawen's book has used a quite broad sense, including digital Silk Road and so on and so forth. And we see that actually not only inbound but outbound investment, China and investment are in a state of flux. They're using soft law, hard law, FTAs, bilateral investment treaties, even trilateral investment treaties. And then you have the issue about, what does a new emerging network look like? Because they are, for BRI, for example, China is at the center, which will be different from the previous, network. If you look into history of China's investment, Yao mentioned in her book. So we see a changing landscape, of the emerging network where China, arguably in a central role, particularly in the context of the BRI. And also, if we look into the landscape, also in terms of subjects, the approach also varies. Yao also spent quite a lot of the income on the, sustainable development, but that story will be, vary, from sustainable development to digital transformation. So even if we look into emerging landscape, those kind of the landscape will vary according to subjects. And finally, in terms of China, how to understand China and foreign investment or international investment, I think also it faces challenges. As mentioned in the book, there are many challenges. I think there are at least two ways to look into that. One is extrinsic challenges, like the geopolitical dynamics, geoeconomic one, which affect many aspects. Yao was mentioning in her book, like, how China affects the rules, because they'll be affected by what are happening elsewhere. And also for intrinsic challenges, that includes also the relationship between the roles of the government and the market. Yao mentioned about the, the law enforcement, how the law in the book and law in practice. I think at the end of the day, that involves, where is the government, the role in that regard vis-a-vis that of the market. And the second question I want to mention briefly is that what are the broader implications for public-private sector, ranging from investment decision to rural negotiations, given the time? I think I just throw in some keywords. One that is are we seeing more, independence or interdependence in the value chains? We see many keywords like coupling, decoupling, de-risking. I'm sure that some of the esteemed panelists will discuss that later. But I think that makes sense for us to think about, for China and investment, what does it mean for not only China, but outsiders, Are we see a kind of, that they have interdependence as we have seen in globalization, but also are we seeing also increasingly independency or de-risking or whatever word you prefer in that regard? They'll have a lot of implication down the track for that. And finally, I'm conscious of time of 5 minutes to 10, I think around out of that, is what are the future direction? I think China has some, in terms of China and investment, there are common points. If you look into, country like China and the US, for example, there are common points. China, is both, foreign investment importer, but also exporter. So that's something, China has some similarities, but also there are a lot of things which are different. China's governance model is different. And also, if you look into BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, you don't find the counterparts, in the rest of the world. Obviously, that fact itself makes China and investment regime a quite different one from the other countries. And to a final point I want to mention here, if we look into the future directions, is that whatever we see that's in this landscape, there are high requirements for governance, of investment, not only for China, but also for countries or stakeholders, public or private one, engaging with China. Because a keyword here will be uncertainty. So we have a lot of uncertainty, inbound, outbound investment drop, as Yao mentioned just now, geoeconomic factors, how do we see the tech war, the tension in law-related areas, integration with the global economy, Yao mentioned, also affected by those kind of uncertainty. And so the governance in that regard will be very important, dealing with uncertainty ranging from economic one, but also technical one, if you're thinking about new technology, sustainable development. And you probably need to balance, between on one hand, before I conclude, a flexibility, which you want to be, resilient and see, what landscape change as a private actor, how to design your value chain to regulators, how do you deal with, new laws, sanctions and so on and so forth. But also on the other hand, provide stability, because for investors, they need the policy stability, and also that means confidence. So it's a lot of work to be done in that regard. They probably need learning, need international coordination, but unfortunately, in current in international relations, those kind of the trust are still missing to a large extent. So more efforts and research like what Yawen has done is urgently needed. So I would like to congratulate Yao again, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Heng. So a point of order, we will let Yawen, of course, react to these suggestions. And also there is a question in the Q&A for Yawen that basically asks whether there is an explanation for UK and Switzerland faring very high in terms of investments to China. Now, before giving the floor to Yawen to give her the possibility to react to this, I would invite anybody else who wants to ask a question to either type it in the Q&A box or raise a hand in the participant list, and I will give them the floor. We don't have a lot of time, so it's one round of questions right after Yawen speaks to the suggestions so far for about a minute or so, if you don't mind. Thank you.
So it's my turn now. Thank you so much, Prof. Wang. I think it's very, very helpful comment, and it basically highlight the key points I want to make in the book and also the presentation. So I think for me, my understanding is that when we look at China's foreign investment, it's not only investment. We are basically looking at the country, the society, the economy, basically everything. And that's why I really feel that, I mean, at first, I only want to study law, but then when I want to solve the research question, it basically leads me to a broader way to look at it. So basically lead me to read a book of like on international relations and also like geopolitics and also other things like the administrative law and basically the administrative structure in China. So I would say that there are actually your points. The point raised by you is that really they help me to they help me to go through my research, and also when I did my research, I also found that it's very, very important. So I think for me, I focus on maybe the future. I mean, like from past, I can see like how the law gradually become what it look like now. And now when we think about the future, we know like how the law emerge now, how can it influence the future lawmaking in China, and also how it influence the future development of China's two-way investments. So I think for us, maybe it's still, I mean, like not much can be said now from the law itself because it has been improved a lot, and I think that I see how the problem being addressed like through cases or through like more explanatory notes or more administrative documents issued by government. So how they solve these problems bit by bit in the past, and I think the problems will be solved gradually in the future. And I think for now, for the legal regime itself, maybe the border issue will be more serious now, more important, and have larger and larger influence on China's two-way investments. And sorry, Filippo, can you repeat again the questions posed by audience? There's a question now.
So there's now two questions, and you might want to answer or simply take them with you. One is a question about UK and Switzerland, which appear to be leading in investments into China, and whether you think there is an explanation for this. Then we have a question from Professor Kong, and China seems to have less policy space to promote development goals of foreign investments, and maybe there's a larger comment. What I propose, because we are almost out of time, if you have quick reactions to this, you can obviously share them with us. And for Professor Kong, this is maybe a good question to explore in the second half of the discussion, which will start in about 10 to 15 minutes in the discussion led by Professor Calamita. So this is, I have to make do with the time we have available. So I will give the floor to Yawen for some concluding thought, and then I will thank our participants and call a 10 minutes break before we reconvene. Thank you.
Thanks. I think they are very good questions, and I also find that we don't have enough time here to discuss them in more details. But so I mean, like for UK and Switzerland's foreign investment in China, you can see like the policy guidance behind. I mean, like especially like you can be influenced by the relations between these two countries and what the leaders did. Like when they visit each other's country, what they propose, and also, I mean, like investments for these aspects, it can be heavily influenced by policies currently, and also they can be encouraged by foreign investment legal regime, but maybe with a limited role because this regime it applies to investments generally. So if certain countries they play a larger role here, you can see the encouragements from country for sure, and I think that's it for now, and we can discuss more details maybe later.
Absolutely.
No.
And there's another question in the chat that discusses whether the book addresses the pandemic and any change in investment law that is due to the pandemic. And I don't remember the answer by heart, but do you want to just give a brief yes or no?
I do mention the pandemic. I do mention the zero case policy, but it's just mentioned because not many change made to the legal regime itself. It's just a policy implemented directly and have direct influence on everyone and all kind of investment inside of China.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I hope you can all join me to thank Yaven for the presentation and Professor Wang for the discussion. All very fruitful. I'll call it a break now, and at o'clock, so it's going to be, I think, 6 o'clock Singapore time and something else o'clock elsewhere, we will start the second half of the discussion led by Professor Calamita. And I'm sure that even those of you who would like to have questions, or do you would like your questions to be answered more deeply, that is the perfect occasion to raise them again. So thanks a lot, and I'll call it a break. And we will meet again in 7 to 8 minutes. Thanks.